Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. And it's all about burnout and specifically what we can learn from Wayne Cordeiro's book, Leading on Empty.
Okay.
Now, you know the title. It might seem like it's just for pastors, right? But I think there's something here for everyone.
Hmm.
That feeling of just being drained, of being depleted, running on fumes, no matter what line of work you're in.
Right. And Cordeiro, he writes from that place, of hitting the wall himself.
Yeah.
So it's part memoir, part practical guide. And what I find really interesting is how he uses these very vivid images to explain what burnout actually feels like.
Oh, yeah.
Starting with this analogy in chapter 3 about a marathon runner.
Yeah, he talks about how marathon runners hit this wall
Hmm.
when their glycogen stores are just completely depleted
Yeah.
and their bodies just can't keep up. And I remember training for a half marathon and feeling that firsthand.
Oh, really?
It's like all of a sudden you slam into a brick wall
Oh, wow.
and every step just becomes agony.
That's a perfect illustration, I think, for how we approach work sometimes.
Yeah.
We tap into those initial reserves of energy and motivation. We push through the early signs of fatigue, thinking,
Well,
oh, I can just power through this. But just like that runner,
right.
eventually we crash.
Speaking of crashing, some of the stats that Cordeiro throws out about pastors are really alarming.
Yeah.
Did you know 80% report a negative impact on their family? 75% have experienced these major stress crises?
Hmm.
And a whopping 90% feel inadequately equipped to handle the demands of ministry.
Those are some pretty heavy numbers, but they also point to, I think, a much larger societal issue that goes way beyond just the clergy.
Right,
I mean, many professions, particularly ones that involve really intense emotional labor,
right.
they face similar challenges. Think about healthcare workers.
Oh, yeah,
Teachers, social workers, they're constantly giving,
right.
often at the expense of their own well-being.
It's like we expect them to be superhuman,
Right.
to give constantly without needing to recharge.
And it's not just a modern phenomenon either.
Right.
I mean, Cordero even brings up Mother Teresa, who dedicated her life to serving the poorest of the poor.
And yet, what's really striking is that she experienced this profound spiritual dryness for decades
Right.
while doing this work.
Yeah, it challenges our perception of sainthood, doesn't it?
Totally.
We tend to think of these figures as just constantly radiating joy.
Right.
But Mother Teresa's story reminds us that even the most devoted individuals, they're still susceptible to the toll of this relentless giving.
It makes you wonder, how do we spot the signs before we reach that point of utter depletion?
Hmm.
Cordero uses this really great analogy of a tsunami
Okay.
to describe these subtle warnings that we often miss.
He explains how a tsunami, the initial waves might seem small,
Yeah,
even manageable, but they're actually signaling this much larger, more destructive force that's on the horizon.
right.
Similarly, with burnout, we often dismiss those early warning signs
Yeah.
as just part of the job,
Oh, absolutely.
not realizing they're actually foreshadowing a potential crisis.
So what are some of those early signs?
Well, he lists things like emotional volatility,
Okay.
trouble focusing,
Yeah,
difficulty sleeping, and even like an increase in temptations as those initial tremors that we need to pay attention to.
right. Have you noticed any of those creeping into your own life?
It's so crucial to be aware of these subtle shifts because recognizing them early on,
Yeah,
it's really the key to preventing a full-blown breakdown. I
absolutely.
think often the biggest hurdle is our own perception. We get so caught up in the daily grind that we start to view those warning signs as normal,
Oh, for sure.
even acceptable,
Cordero talks about this tendency to feel overwhelmed by everything you know,
right?
blurring the lines between what we can control and what we should just let go. It's like we take on the weight of the world carrying burdens that aren't even ours to bear.
He suggests this very simple but powerful exercise to combat this.
Okay?
Grab a sheet of paper, draw a line down the middle,
Hmm.
and list your concerns on one side and your responsibilities on the other.
Okay.
This visual separation, it helps to clarify what you can actively influence
Right.
and what you need to just let go of, bringing a sense of order to the chaos.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
I think we often underestimate the power of such simple practices
Oh,
to
totally.
bring clarity and reduce anxiety.
For sure.
Speaking of prioritizing, Cordero has this really interesting concept of the most important 5%.
Mm.
He argues that, the vast majority of our work, 85% maybe, is stuff that anyone could do.
Okay.
But it's that remaining 5%, our faith, our family,
Right.
those key relationships that really nourish our souls.
Mm.
That's what makes all the difference.
It's a profound idea, isn't it?
Yeah,
We can achieve all sorts of external success in that 85%,
right.
but if we neglect that core 5%, we'll always feel a sense of emptiness.
I think that's so true.
True fulfillment comes from nurturing those essential elements of our lives.
Absolutely. It's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Hmm,
You can have the most beautiful facade, but if the core is unstable, the whole structure is at risk.
right.
Cordeiro's point is that we need to be intentional about cultivating that 5%, making
Yeah.
sure it doesn't get squeezed out by the demands of the other 85.
He even shares his own struggle with Rev,
Mhm.
coming from a background where workaholism was almost like a badge of honor.
Right.
It wasn't until he discovered this musical concept of legato, the idea of allowing space between the notes to create a richer, fuller sound,
Oh, wow.
that he really grasped the importance of incorporating pauses into his life.
The legato analogy is so powerful because it reframes rest as an integral part of high performance,
Mm-hmm.
not just a break from work.
Right.
It's like realizing that those silent spaces in a piece of music are just as crucial as the notes themselves,
Right.
creating this beautiful interplay that enhances the overall composition.
Precisely.
Think about athletes needing rest days to recover and rebuild their muscles,
Right.
or writers needing fallow periods to replenish their creative wells.
Hmm.
It's counterintuitive, but stepping back, allowing ourselves those intentional pauses, actually enhances our ability to produce our best work in the long run.
I agree.
Now, this next tip from Cordeiro might seem a bit counterintuitive at first,
Okay.
but bear with me. He talks about respecting your natural sleep rhythms,
Mm.
especially when it comes to sleeping in. His advice: instead of shifting your whole day later, go to bed earlier so you wake up naturally.
It's about working with your body's natural sleep-wake cycle rather than constantly fighting against it.
Right.
We often think we're catching up on sleep by sleeping in,
Right.
but we're really just disrupting our natural rhythm, creating more stress and fatigue in the long run.
He then shares this really funny anecdote about playing golf with his wife.
Okay.
He's getting frustrated with his game, and she suggests he take a mulligan.
A mulligan.
And for those who aren't familiar with golf, the mulligan is basically a do-over,
Okay.
a chance to retry a shot without penalty. And it got him thinking about how we rarely extend that same grace to ourselves. We
Hmm.
hold ourselves to these impossibly high standards,
Right.
beating ourselves up for every mistake or setback.
Hmm.
But embracing this concept of a mulligan,
Hmm.
it allows us to approach our work and our lives with a sense of compassion,
Right.
recognizing that it's okay to stumble and that we have the capacity to learn from our mistakes and try again.
It's like giving ourselves permission to be human.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
To not be perfect all the
To
time.
not be perfect.
And that sense of self-compassion can be so freeing.
But even with all the self-compassion in the world, we sometimes miss those less obvious areas
Hmm.
that can really impact our performance. And that's where Cordeiro's concept of a personal dashboard comes in.
Oh,
He
interesting.
suggests we envision a dashboard
Okay.
similar to the one in a car,
Hmm.
to monitor those less tangible aspects of our lives that can affect our overall well-being,
Like what?
like our social connections, our attitude, our finances.
Hmm.
These elements might not seem directly related to our work,
Right.
but they play a really crucial role in how we showed up
Hmm.
and how effectively we perform.
So it's about proactively monitoring those areas, right?
Yes,
Identifying our own personal warning lights before they become major problems.
exactly. Instead of waiting for a breakdown to force us to pay attention,
Right.
we can course correct early on by tuning into those subtle signals. What are some warning lights you've noticed in your own life?
Oh, that's a good question.
What are those areas that you tend to neglect until they become major issues?
I think that's a valuable exercise to reflect on.
Yeah.
Because we all have those blind spots, right?
Hmm.
Those areas we tend to push aside until they demand our attention.
Right.
By creating our own personal dashboards, we can start to pay attention to those subtle cues
Yeah.
and address them before they escalate into full-blown crises.
And this awareness leads us to one of Cordeiro's most compelling ideas,
Mm.
intentional sabbaticals. And he's not just talking about vacations when we're already burnt out,
Okay.
but planned periods of rest and renewal woven into the fabric of our lives.
I like that.
He actually suggests a 3-month sabbatical after every 7 years of ministry.
Wow. That's a pretty radical concept for many people.
It is.
But it speaks to the profound importance of prioritizing renewal,
Yeah,
not just for our own well-being, but for the sustainability of our work.
right.
He sees it as an investment in long-term effectiveness,
Yeah.
recognizing that we can't pour from an empty cup indefinitely.
3 months might seem like a luxury, but think about it.
Hmm.
Athletes have off seasons.
Right.
Academics have sabbatical years.
It's built into the structure of their profession.
It is.
Because they understand that periods of rest and rejuvenation are essential for sustained success.
Exactly. Cordeiro challenges us to adopt a similar mindset, regardless of our profession.
Mm.
He even shares this really vivid dream he had about a farmer who sells out of his produce every day.
Oh, wow.
And customers keep clamoring for more, but the farmer calmly tells them, come back tomorrow.
That's such a powerful image.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah,
It reminds us that we're not inexhaustible resources.
right.
We need to respect our limits and recognize that we can't operate at full capacity all the time.
It's about embracing the rhythm of war and rest.
Yes.
Knowing that setting boundaries and saying no is not a sign of weakness,
Right.
but a strategy for a long-term sustainability.
Absolutely. Just like that farmer, we need to replenish our own reserves so we can continue to offer our best to the world.
I love that analogy.
So there you have it,
Mm.
a deep dive into preventing burnout based on the wisdom of Wayne Cordeiro. Hopefully you're feeling a bit more equipped to recognize those warning signs in yourself
Mm.
and prioritize your well-being.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I think it would be helpful to provide our listeners with a concise summary
Oh, for sure.
of Cordeiro's strategies for combating burnout.
Right.
Think of it as a cheat sheet
I love that.
you can refer back to as you navigate the demands of your own life. Ready for our top 10?
Hit me with it.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Point number 1, recognize those warning signs. Remember that tsunami analogy.
Yeah.
Emotional volatility, concentration difficulties, trouble sleeping, increased temptations.
Hmm.
These are the initial tremors that signal something needs to change.
Got it.
Point number 2, respect your limits. You're not a machine.
Right.
You can't pour from an empty cup like that farmer in Cordeiro's dream. It's okay to say no.
Yeah.
And prioritize replenishing your own resources.
Okay.
Point number 3, embrace rest.
Hmm.
Think legato, those spaces between the notes that create a richer, more harmonious sound.
Right.
Rest isn't just about avoiding burnout. It's an essential component of sustained high performance.
Love it.
Point number 4, prioritize your most important 5%. What are those non-negotiables in your life?
Hmm.
Faith, family, relationships that deserve your focused time and energy.
Yeah.
Don't let the tyranny of the urgent crowd out what truly matters.
Such good advice.
Point number 5, clarify concerns versus responsibilities.
Okay.
Divide a sheet of paper, list your concerns on one side, your responsibilities on the other.
Hmm.
This simple exercise brings clarity and reduces anxiety by helping you focus on what you can actually control.
Okay. I like it.
Point number 6, give yourself a mulligan, embrace self-compassion.
Yes.
We all make mistakes, have setbacks. It's part of the human experience.
Right.
Don't beat yourself up. Grant yourself the same grace you would extend to others.
For sure.
Point number 7, work with your natural rhythms if you need to sleep in. Don't shift your whole day. Go to bed earlier and wake up naturally.
Okay.
Respecting your body's natural sleep-wake cycle reduces stress and promotes overall well-being.
Makes sense.
Point number 8, create a personal dashboard. Identify your warning lights.
Hmm.
Those less obvious areas like your social life, attitude, finances that can impact your performance if neglected.
Yeah.
Proactive monitoring helps you course correct early and avoid major crises down the line.
Okay.
Point number 9, plan intentional sabbaticals. These aren't just vacations, they're dedicated periods of rest and renewal.
Hmm.
Consider Cordeiro's suggestion, a 3-month sabbatical after every 7 years of intense work.
Right.
It's an investment in your long-term sustainability and effectiveness.
Got it.
And finally, point number 10, choose to live intentionally, move beyond reaction and conformity,
Hmm.
and consciously craft a life aligned with your values, your goals, your deepest aspirations.
Wow. What a fantastic summary. Those 10 points really distill the essence of Cordeiro's message. It's a powerful reminder that preventing burnout isn't about a one-size-fits-all solution, but about creating a personalized approach that honors our individual needs and aspirations.
And remember, even small steps taken consistently can lead to significant change over time.
So true.
Choose one strategy that resonates with you and commit to implementing it this week. You might be surprised by the positive ripple effects it creates in your life.
Wonderful advice.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll be back next week with part 2 of our deep dive into leading on empty.
It's amazing how these small shifts in how we think about things can really change how we experience work and life.
Oh, totally.
Instead of seeing rest as this luxury or like a sign of weakness,
Right.
we can start to see it as a strategic investment in
Yeah.
our well-being and effectiveness.
It's like giving ourselves permission to recharge, to step away from those constant demands and really let our minds and bodies recover.
I like that.
And that replenishment is crucial not just for, preventing burnout, but for cultivating a deeper sense of fulfillment and joy
Right.
in everything we do.
And that leads us to Cordeiro's challenge to
right.
move beyond just preventing burnout
Mm-hmm.
and step into the space of intentional living.
Okay.
He encourages us to shift from this reactive mode,
Hmm.
where we're constantly responding to external pressures
Right.
to a place of conscious choice.
It's about designing a life that aligns with our values, our goals, our deepest aspirations,
Mm,
not just drifting along letting circumstances dictate our choices,
right.
but how do we actually translate this idea into concrete action?
Yeah.
What does it mean to live intentionally?
Well, Cordero offers this really powerful framework for thinking about this.
Okay,
He suggests we picture life as a canvas
okay.
and realize that we, as the artists, have the power to choose the colors, the textures, the composition.
Hmm.
We can decide what we want to create, what to emphasize, what to leave out altogether.
It's a beautiful metaphor.
Hmm.
It reminds us that we're not just passive recipients of life's experiences,
Right.
but active participants in shaping this masterpiece that is our own unique journey.
It's like we're holding the paintbrush.
We are.
We get to create something beautiful.
But just like an artist needs a clear vision before they start painting,
Right.
we need to define what intentional living looks like for us.
Absolutely. And that requires introspection. Reflection, maybe even a bit of soul searching.
Mm.
It's about asking ourselves those big, often uncomfortable questions.
Right.
What truly matters to me?
Yeah.
What brings me joy?
Hmm.
What kind of legacy do I want to leave behind?
Those are big questions.
They are, but they hold the key
Yeah.
to unlocking a life of purpose and meaning.
And sometimes those answers might surprise us.
Totally.
We might discover that what we thought we valued
Hmm.
doesn't actually line up with how we're spending our time and energy.
That's so calm.
Or we might realize that we've been chasing those external markers of success
Hmm.
at the expense of nurturing our inner selves,
Cordeiro emphasizes that intentional living isn't about achieving this perfect state,
right?
but making conscious choices that move us closer to the life we actually want.
I like that.
It's about aligning our actions with our values,
Right.
even if that means making tough decisions
Right.
or challenging those societal expectations.
He talks about setting healthy boundaries, prioritizing self-care, learning to say no to commitments that drain us or pull us away from what matters most.
It's about recognizing that our time and energy are precious resources that we need to protect and invest wisely.
And that can be so hard
It can.
in a culture that often glorifies busyness and productivity.
Right, we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us we need to do more, achieve more, strive for more.
But Cordero invites us to resist that pressure and cultivate a sense of stillness, of presence, of just being.
I love that.
He reminds us that true fulfillment doesn't come from checking things off an endless to-do list, but from savoring the simple joys, connecting with loved ones, and making a meaningful contribution. And sometimes that means slowing down, letting go of the need to control everything,
Right.
and embracing the imperfections
Embracing the imperfect.
of our human experience.
Cordero's message is ultimately one of hope and empowerment.
It is.
It's a reminder that we have the power to choose how we want to live,
Hmm.
how we want to work, how we want to engage with the world.
Right. We can choose to be consumed by the demands and expectations of others,
Mm.
or we can choose to create a life that is authentically our own.
And while that might not always be easy, it's a journey worth taking.
I agree.
By embracing these principles of intentional living, we can prevent burnout, but cultivate a life that is both fulfilling and sustainable,
Right.
one that nourishes our souls
And allows us to make a real impact
and allows us to make a real impact.
on the world around us. And now for our final takeaway, we've prepared a concise summary
Okay?
of Cordero's strategies for combating burnout.
I like it.
Consider it a cheat sheet you can refer back to as you navigate the demands of your own life. Ready for the top 10.
Absolutely. I think this will give our listeners a valuable resource to implement these strategies.
Wonderful. All right, let's dive into those 10 strategies. Okay, so first up, acknowledge those warning signs. Remember that tsunami analogy we talked about. Emotional volatility, concentration difficulties, sleep disturbances, even an increase in those temptations. Those are the initial tremors suggesting you need to change course.
Recognizing these subtle signals early on is so important for preventing a full-blown crisis. It's about tuning into our inner landscape and realizing when things feel a little off.
Next, we have respecting your limits. You're not an inexhaustible wellspring, and trying to function like that will inevitably lead to depletion. Remember that farmer in Cordero's dream. Saying no and prioritizing replenishing those reserves is totally okay.
It demonstrates self-awareness and a commitment to sustainable engagement. Saying no is not a weakness.
Third on our list is embracing rest. Think about that beautiful legato analogy, those spaces between the notes that give the music its richness and texture. Rest isn't just about avoiding burnout. It's a fundamental component of sustained excellence.
Absolutely. Those pauses, those intentional breaks allow us to come back to what we're doing with renewed energy and creativity.
Number 4 is prioritizing your most important 5%. Those non-negotiable parts of your life, faith, family, meaningful connections. Things that deserve your undivided attention and energy. Don't let urgent things overshadow what truly nourishes your soul.
It's about figuring out what's essential and what's extra, making sure those things that bring us real fulfillment aren't sacrificed to the altar of busyness.
Fifth is clarifying concerns versus responsibilities. Get a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, put your worries on one side and your obligations on the other. This visual distinction helps clear up the mental clutter, letting you focus on what you can actually influence.
It's a simple but powerful way to reduce anxiety and reclaim a sense of control in our complex lives.
Number six is about giving yourself a mulligan, embracing self-compassion. We all make mistakes and have setbacks. It's part of being human. Instead of beating ourselves up, let's extend that same grace and understanding we would to someone we care about.
Cultivating self-compassion creates space for growth and learning. We can approach challenges with a more balanced and forgiving perspective.
Seventh is working with your natural rhythms if you need more sleep. Don't shift your whole day later, adjust your bedtime so you can wake up naturally.
Respecting our body's sleep-wake cycles is crucial for our physical and mental well-being. It's about working with our natural energy flow and not forcing some artificial rhythm.
Number eight is building the personal dashboard. Identify those often overlooked things, social connections, your attitude, finances, that can really affect your performance. If you neglect them, regularly monitoring these warning lights allows you to make adjustments before small issues become big problems.
It's a proactive approach to well-being, realizing that taking care of these seemingly less important parts of our lives can have a big impact on how well we do overall.
Ninth on our list is building intentional sabbaticals into your life. Not just vacations, dedicated periods of rest and renewal woven into your life. Consider Cordeiro's suggestion of 3 month sabbatical after every 7 years of hard work.
It's helpful to think of sabbaticals as an investment in long-term sustainability and effectiveness. Stepping away every so often allows us to come back with new perspectives and renewed energy.
And finally, our 10th point is to embrace living intentionally, move beyond simply reacting to outside pressures, and consciously build a life that reflects your values, goals, and aspirations.
It's about realizing we have the power to shape our own experiences, making choices that lead us to a life of authenticity, purpose, and fulfillment.
And that concludes our 10-point summary of Cordeiro's strategies for combating burnout and cultivating a life of sustainable joy. We hope you found these insights helpful and feel empowered to use them in your own journey.
Keep in mind, even small, consistent steps can lead to big changes over time. Pick one strategy that speaks to you and try to implement it this week. You might be surprised by the positive ripple effects it creates in your life.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into preventing burnout. We hope you leave feeling equipped and inspired to prioritize your well-being and build a life that truly nourishes your soul.
Remember, you have the power to create a life that is both fulfilling and sustainable. Take the wisdom we've explored today and embark on your journey towards a life of greater intentionality, balance, and joy. So 2 and 4, 7-2.